right, I think we're live. So welcome to the June 10th School Finance Committee meeting. When I looked over the agenda, the only suggestion I would make is a change on the agenda, especially because Jim, even though I see his empty chair, is here, is that we move up the facilities end of the year funding considerations to 3 instead of 4, just because we're going to go through all of those reports and then Jim can go over that and then we can come back and do any of the board questions. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
That's fine.
All right. With that, I think we'll dive right in. I'll start with you, Jim, because the first thing that was on the list is the CIP project update. So I'll put you on the stage.
Okay, so all you guys pretty much read over my note to Dr. Morrison Sue. Roughly, we are seeing some savings just from, I mean, that's kind of the beauty of what happened with COVID. Contractors asked to get a head start on some of the projects that we didn't go out to bid on. When I started asking for quotations, they were like, yeah, right now is the best time to do it. And I think we were able to save some money right off the bat. I'm not sure if you want me to go through this line by line, but I guess I would say the only thing that hasn't like officially started yet is the parking lot, and you'll start to see some activity towards the end of next week. I asked them to hold.
The public doesn't have the list, so you don't have to read it line by line, but maybe go over the broad heading so the public who's seeing this can follow you.
Okay, right on. Okay. So the first and probably the most expensive project we got going on is the high school parking lot tennis court project. We're going to break ground fairly quickly. We asked them to hold off a week just because of graduation. We didn't want the trucks out there, so that's why you haven't seen any activity so far. Again, that was brought before the board, was approved. We did POs. We're about $5,000 under the budgeted amount for that. However, there was some civil engineering costs that were missed, and what that really is construction oversight. And I think the second phase of getting the plans together. So that's where we fall in that. The Mohammed roof renovation, that one came out significantly under budget. Remember, just like at budget time, we put this list together and we put in the numbers almost 8 months before we actually go out to bid. So they project like increases and project tariffs and other things that might affect the project. So I always try to use a higher number. It's easier to work backwards than start out at the supreme amount. So you could see the savings there. We came in at 168,000 roughly out of a $230,000 budget. The server ACs that we want to do, the air conditioners for all the server rooms, we are roughly, I would say, $35,000 under budget on that. The reason for that drastic amount was I'm able to actually hold off on some of the other, what they call those minor data closets over at the high school, where they have AC units. I'm thinking about like just stalling that even more. With some of the newer computer equipment, it doesn't generate that much heat, so we actually haven't been running air conditioners in those spaces. And actually just working with IT, we may not even need them in those spaces anymore. So those equipment may not even need to be replaced. The other project that hasn't officially begun yet was the junior core walls. We connected with Bowen Construction on that. That came in roughly $5,000 under budget. We wanted, again, they're going to be kind of dual managing the middle school and this project at the same time. And they had plans to begin, obviously, after school let out on the 22nd of June. The cracked flooring, I don't have a specific number where we're in at yet because I've already bought the product. And to be honest, if the core walls was going to be pulled for any reason, we wouldn't do the core flooring at this time. But again, we made promises to pay and purchase order for both of these projects. And then Mastway was the big one. Mastway, that flooring, that's the contractor was like, I want to get in there as soon as possible. We're able to save you some money if we can start right away. We're behind. Usually we do schools and offices, but people are a little bit nervous, or we have activities still going on. So you could see that we're almost about $9,000 under budget on that. And that project is pretty much completed fully at this point, just because we were able to get them in so early.
So Jim, is it safe to say that your overall savings on this is around 110,000?
Yeah, I have 104,867 right now. And again, I use that with caution. Again, I know that every other project that hasn't been started yet is spot on, except for the tennis court, just like the middle school. If they hit something in there that requires a little bit more excavation, even though we have a little contingency in there, I just am more nervous that if there's anything that's going to go wrong, it's probably going to be on that project. I'm not anticipating anything, but I just have to say it as devil's advocate.
You mean like you hit ledge, right?
Well, we're actually raising that up, but you just never know what was buried there. I'm not saying burial ground, but you just never know. So
Suitables, unsuitables.
Well, yeah, they're taking out the majority of it. So
Can I ask you a question about the server room stuff? So it's like
Sure.
in there you say that, and I don't really know what Mohammed and Mastway look like. Is there a dedicated server room itself? Because you said the AC is failing or failed and failing.
yeah, so currently over at Mohammed and Mastway, there's a dedicated server room. It's its own individual space with its own individual air conditioner. Mohammed, yep, that unit went down about a year ago, and we just put a portable AC unit in that space, so it's been cooling. Again, IT has really done a great job over the past couple of years with their battery backups, with getting them more condensed and small. They don't generate a lot of heat as they used to, but they do need AC to cool that space year round pretty much. So yeah,
So
it's individual.
is that pushed into the, what is that, 21-22 CIP then? The air conditioning for those two places?
You mean for the whole entire school?
Just for those server rooms, when would you anticipate replacing the AC in Mohammed and Mastway?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. Now I get it. Well, Mohammed, we're actually going to be starting that room next week. While we learned about the summer program, we want to get that system installed before, because they use technology. So we're going to have to shut down the server for 2 or 3 days during that work. And we just wanted to get it done before the extended school year. Mastway, we haven't. I have it quoted. I have a purchase order, but that can be done at any time during the summer.
Question.
$64,399 would be to replace both Mohammed and Mastway, Jim?
Oh, no, that's what was already done over at the high school, because the high school is complete. That server room there and the 2 spaces in the junior core are already set. So, of course, I had it and didn't bring it out. But
So is it like with that one, because you had budgeted $100,000, you spent, call it just about 65.
Right.
Does it cost $35,000 to put in the AC in Mohammed and Mastway?
Oh no, that $64,000 number includes Mohammed and Mastway that hasn't even started yet.
Okay, perfect.
When I look back, so this is outstanding, and I really appreciate both the initiative of you and your team getting these things all kicked off and realizing the savings, and also being able to see it up front like this. The one thing that I think backs off the savings a little bit is I think the estimate for the high school flooring project was actually $13,000. So I don't know if we're over on that, or if we just need to recalculate what the savings is here.
What do you mean? The 13,000 that was in the budget?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, you're right. It looks like I reversed those numbers. the 27,000 that we removed to the 13,000.
Yeah, the
That was
27 was the gym floor that we decided not to do this year. Yeah.
Oh, correct. You're right, Michael. That's an error on my part on this list. It's supposed to be 13,000. The material that we already bought, maybe even half that now.
Okay.
So, wow, good catch, Michael. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everyone.
But you think we're still we're not going to be way off on that one, it sounds like, anyhow. So
I don't think so.
Yeah, I have to agree with Michael. I think it was really a great idea to utilize this window to get the work done and to save the money. I think is kind of the best case scenario. I mean, I don't think we're gonna down the road there'll be a better time when the facilities were free. You have free access to do it, and the workers really wanted to get the work done. So I think it was a great initiative. Other questions? Go ahead.
Just a little bit about the parking lot. Wow. We got such a good deal on this already, and that would be one if we were to delay that even further and revisit this project in the next 2 years, you would see a significant increase where we'd all be like, we should have done it while we had it. So
That's our contract, right, Jim?
what's that?
Any backing off of any of these means we have signed contracts with vendors, which would complicate backing away from that project anyway.
Exactly.
And on a side note on that is that when we open up that parking lot, I know it's only really going to take care of the parking issue until the new tennis courts come. And then we're kind of where we are now, plus a few spots. Are we going to, is that going to be reserved for student parking until those tennis courts come in? Are we going to expand student parking, more lottery, spots, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, I don't think so, Brian. And we still have to work out exactly how many spaces we need for the middle school staff as well as the construction workers themselves. So, until we have that kind of fleshed out, my thought was that we would reserve some of this space for middle school staff who lost their space at either on Denison or in the back parking lot. And then we could expand student parking lot, but we need to make sure that we have enough space for our staff. I will tell you that, again, this is another place where the town of Durham gets kudos because they've been working to support our use of Denison by permit during the school day. And that's going to be a big help in terms of making sure our teaching staff have places to park. And then the parking spaces that the town did along Code Drive in front of the school opened up another opportunity for us to have our staff park closer to the school. So we have not, and we need to go right through that and determine exactly how many spaces we need. And we were thinking that any overflow from that would happen at the new parking lot of the tennis court, even if we had to put a shuttle bus in to make that happen, Brian. So that's work yet to be done.
Okay.
Other questions on the CIP? All right, so we'll move to the next one, which is the 5-year summary of expenditure balances. And I have to admit, when I looked at this one, I'm confused at it. So can you run us through this, Sue?
Yeah, so this is before we made any transfers to any funds. So I just wanted to show you.
Al, could I just interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Did you not want to bring the end of the year funding thing up forward while Jim was with us, or was that earlier?
Well, actually, we might as well. I hate to keep Jim staying here the whole time, so sure, that's fine. We'll just jump right ahead. You have to scroll down your list, which was the end of the year fund balance consideration. So you might as well run through those, Jim.
Yeah, this is the wish list that I give to Sue every year. If we have any money and any type of realized savings, this is stuff that we want to kick off that either came up after the budget was already built or kind of squeaky wheel gets the grease sometimes in this. I don't mean to use that so loosely, but first I got to say that each one of these things are really compassionate each one of the principals or people that have been advocating for this. So I just want to start off with that. And again, I did my best to put this in priority. The way that I see it as facility may not necessarily be the same as what a principal may share individually, but I just wanted to throw that out there. So very first and foremost, we wanted to put in a generator over at the SAU. Again, it's only a big need when we need it. And then it's just, since we don't have any power outages lately, it just kind of falls off the radar. But every single time we have a power outage, the SAU is the most vulnerable, and we say we got to do something. And this $14,000 number is how to do it right. And instead of just portable units and running cables out the window, it's the last frontier of our district that doesn't have backup generation. So I put that at first and foremost. The second one, which is a very strong for me, is we've been talking about these high school cafeteria chairs forever. Is we got this price down so much. It's been campaigned for and then taken out year after year. And the problem is not just they're in bad shape. It's the problem we don't have enough of them either. They were original. They don't make that same set anymore. And we don't have enough chairs to seat kids. This could be a big benefit if we decide to use the cafeteria space as breakout or overflow or separating kids in a different way. It has many other benefits. I don't want to repeat myself, but Suzanne and I campaigned for this pretty hard at budget time. The next three items are replacing doors, 2 at Mastway and 1 over at the high school. I don't want to. The reason why I put this now is end of the year fund consideration is I'm going to have to do these regardless anyway next fiscal year. The one, especially over at the high school, is so poor. Whether we kind of like it or not, out of my budget line, we're going to do this. So it's almost like let's get it off now while we have a little bit of realized savings to do. That's my rationale. The other two were pretty highly recommended by Homeland Security. And they're just in really rough shape. There's hardware that there's no longer made. We can't get parts for it. We're going to have to look, even if we did a minor Band-Aid, it'd still be expensive. Let's go for the whole shebang and get them replaced with new hardware. Thought it was a great price. Fifth was the second floor hallway flooring. This was the $27,000 that was taken out of the budget to finish and then do the rest of that cracked floor. Again, it's something that's been needed for a while. It was part of the CIP and reduced. We have some savings if we do all the flooring all at one time. So that's my rationale for that. A little minor issue over at the high school with moving a card access to the rear doors to the to the gymnasium that's frequently used by PE. They prop it open. We want them to stop doing that because it doesn't have a key slot. It's pretty minor it's more of a matter of convenience. Over at Mohammed, we wanted to replace the interior doors to the hallway. One, we talked about this a little bit when we were doing the inside renovations of the main office to match everything. But two, we have a safety issue with those double doors in the hallway. As we block off the gym and cafeteria for weekday evening basketball and programs, that's the critical door. We close off that section to the rest of the school so we don't have wandering. Those doors don't have windows in it to see, so if there is an issue, the custodian can kind of peek over. It's more of a security thing to get full visual of that hallway. That's the rationale for that. This little one for 270 it was to replace the exterior clock with a sign over at Mohammed. Even though that clock hasn't functioned probably since it was installed or properly, we actually did remove it. And we were thinking about, with the new logo, just putting up a round sign in place of that. The next one is the gym floor sanding that it was just in and out of the CIP for months. We talked about it pretty heavily. I was going to house that in my operating budget, but again, since there was a lot of unknowns in the next fiscal year. If we can get that off now, would be helpful. Though that's a very time-sensitive thing about scheduling. And then more flooring over at Mohammed, larger parking lot improvements over in Mohammed as well. It's in rough shape. The generator enclosure, which we've talked about for years past, again, not ultra critical. That's why I put it far down the list. And then finally, I didn't want to create any stir here, but there's a big number, 58,000 for a new fire alarm system over at the high school. I got to reassure, there's nothing broken. There's not any issue with it. We are going to be needing to put a device on that system because we're getting off of copper. This is something that the town of Durham is doing, and we've been communicating with the Durham PD. This is a communication device that needs to go on this panel. But one of the struggles that we've had with this particular system is that it's proprietary. So every time there's an issue, every time there's a problem, it is buku bucks to get a programmer out there. And it's like, it just, it's like kept on demoing. It reminded me of like doing a kitchen renovation where it's like, oh, I just want to replace the countertops. Well, might as well replace the sink. Might as well replace the flooring and the cat. And that's how it kind of mushroomed. So I'm sorry to be, jokingly about that, but that's how this project is like, I need to do one thing, but to do it right in the end, I want to do more. And this is I hope that explains that properly, but yeah, that's where I'm at. That's why it's at the bottom of the list. And again, I got to buy that device probably out of our normal operating budget anyway. But since to do everything, the whole shebang rightly, it'd be nice to do the whole thing. But
How much is just the device, Jim?
I think it's about 3,000.
Okay.
And then again, we're going to be faced with now that, because since UNH did our dispatching for us, we are going to be faced with a monthly charge for if we do a cellular communication device. So we're going to be faced with that. I mean, it might be a wash if we decided to delete that copper phone line that we're paying monthly and do a cellular or a radio type, which is what the town of Durham is doing. That type of system, which is it's free pretty much, but we're going to have to pay for monitoring now.
So Jim, just a couple of suggestions. So the board got this list at the last meeting, and it's going to come forward, I believe, on the next agenda when people have a better idea of what the fund balance is. And so it sounds like, of course, we don't have any. We're really trying to scrimp, I think, to transfer money over for the next budget. But since you keep mentioning the chairs, I think it's hard for the board to visualize what the chairs look like and the numbers in that. And if somebody is going to pitch it, they need to take a picture of what the chairs look like and so they can really give. I mean, if you just tell me we need chairs, right. I'm like, well, I've had 50-year-old chairs sitting at my mother-in-law. So again, it would be helpful if you could have kind of a picture of it, and this is what the problem is, and I think it would clarify it to the board so they could think it through. And then the only other one I put down, since it's really low money, which is the exterior sign of Mohammed. It's only $270. My suggestion would be, why not go to the PTO and make that a gift of like the class of, I think it's 2028. That's not a lot of money. And if the PTO could kick it in, it would be nice, and you'd complete the project. You could cross it off your list.
Jim, also on the chairs, you probably want to get a picture of the chairs you want to replace them with, because if I remember correctly, you said that the current chairs are not stackable, but the new chairs would be stackable, which would be easier to move around. They're on movable stands, I would guess. So when you clean or when you have to move stuff, it's a lot easier to store. So that would probably be a good thing too, because that makes sense.
No problem at all.
We've got several different doors on here. It looks like you were thinking of using the same vendor for all of those. Is there, the way these are priced, are you assuming that we do them all at once, or are they priced a la carte? And is there any opportunity to do them as a package?
Well, they're priced all individually, and I think that's the way that the vendor does. I haven't went to them and said, would there be any discount if we did all three of them together?
Okay. And then the what would be the improvements for the parking lot at Mohammed? I agree it's in kind of rough shape, but exactly what were you planning to do for the 31,000 there?
I wanted to resurface the whole parking lot.
With an overlay?
And bus booths, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There's also a lot of work to be done out back into the access road by the playground. That's in rough shape. And also where the modular unit was, we're having some sinkholes over there. So again, I do have money in my operating budget for that project specifically, which I want to do, but I just wanted to do more because the sections that I do per year just keep on cracking. It's not a good one.
Okay.
Other questions? So I know this is going to come up, Jim. It's like, this is for like a future one of these budget meetings. I mean, we've now looked at what the CIP stuff is in the current 2021 and where you are in it. But I think we're going to need ultimately to revisit the fiscal 21-22 CIP as I know we've thrown out what the 5-year was, but I think we're going to really have to sit down and look at what the priority list was for the CIP for the next budget and go through it. And my hope really with the, I'm feeling slightly more optimistic in a COVID environment. One, that you saved $100,000 just off of the current CIP, and that the fund balance is like pretty good, so that those savings, as we're able to roll them over into the next budget, the hope is that we don't have to cannibalize our CIP as tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
Lou, can I ask you a question related to Jim's savings? When you were calculating the 750, did that include the savings that Jim just articulated, or did it not?
That's next year's budget, right? Two different budgets.
So in theory, the $100,000 would be, if we're tight, would be on the fund balance next spring, right?
Right, it'll be next year, in his next year's budget, correct.
Yeah. Other questions? Anything else on the CIP?
When we're thinking about when do we have to commit to these in order for them to be done out of the fiscal year 20 fund balance? Does that have to be done before June 30th?
Yes, it does. It does have to be done before June 30th. The work
Okay.
doesn't have to be complete, but you have to commit to them.
So you encumber those funds, or
Yes.
you
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm thinking about is if we wanted to do some of these this summer, whether it makes more sense to do it using the 2020 fund balance, or whether it makes sense to take advantage of the savings that Jim's already realized in the 21 CIP. Maybe we get the same effect, but we have the flexibility of still having those funds in the fiscal year 20 fund balance instead of not seeing them till next year.
That makes sense.
And I know it's we're not talking about dollars that move the needle on in a substantial way in terms of say the tax rate or whatever, but if we're going to be able to say to the select boards and the town councils that we're doing what we can to moderate the tax situation, that's one piece of short-term benefit without compromising on what we can do in the long run.
No, I think it's a balance of, that's kind of the cash flow thing. We're trying to balance the CIP or mitigate damage to the CIP, but still have the fund balance to mitigate the tax impact. So it's going to be, I think, a delicate dance.
Yeah. But if we wanted, for example, the chairs, if we said we'll do those out of the fiscal year 21 CIP savings, they could still be done this summer.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the other in terms of the chairs and thinking about Suzanne being able to distribute her students in the fall, the cafeteria and the multi-purpose room provide her, and the 2 new classrooms on the junior wing provide her an opportunity to spread kids out further. I mean, the cafeteria is big enough so you could put a classroom in each corner and you'd still have plenty of social distancing space. So that also is a factor in my support of the church, because we need to have space to spread kids out in.
Yeah, I think we're going to need maximum flexibility, Jim. I think you're right. All right. Is anything else on the CIP?
Thank you, Jim.
Do
Thank
we
you.
need to make a recommendation to the school board, or is we just providing this as information for the next meeting?
That's a good question, Michael. And then do you want to get into the position of doing that, or do you want to just go in the position of saying we reviewed it, this is the list, and have an open conversation with the full board? That's a good one.
Well, I think
We haven't got to that spot yet, so this would be the first time that we actually are there. And it may show up when we do the retirement incentive as well. So,
well, I think the one that has kind of risen to the list that you've thrown out that's relatively small money is the chairs. And so, particularly since we don't have any idea what the opening of the school is going to look like, it seems to me that an investment of $16,000 to give us flexibility to use multiple rooms is probably a smart investment of money. So I think rather than at the next meeting, my thought would be to say that the committee has looked at these, and what's come up over and over again from staff is the chairs. You can do a presentation of like what the chairs are, why we need them, and then the board can decide. Because I think if we just say, hey, let's go down this list, it doesn't give the board enough direction to make a good decision, I don't think.
What about as far as kind of like a budget committee would do, where you say, well, the finance committee recommends this project. Obviously, it's the board's decision as a whole, but as you know, we've reviewed this, we've had a discussion. We recommend that if we're going to do any project, we do this one. Something along that line. I think, we have to, that's kind of what we're here for, is to make recommendations to them rather than have these long drawn out conversations that could go on for hours. But that's why we're here, to kind of funnel it through,
Well, again, that was kind of what I was thinking with, again, having kind of, it would probably be Suzanne who would have to come to the next board meeting and then say what the problem with the chair is. You could show what the chairs are and why you think it's important in the fall opening of the schools to have new chairs. And then that would kind of focus the discussion.
yeah, I was going to have Jim and Suzanne there anyway.
Go ahead.
If you want me to just put a slide about what the chairs look like and the new ones, do you want me to go that far and give you a picture of what the doors look like and maybe what the cracked flooring looks like as well?
That wouldn't hurt, Jim. You can put that in the backup just because it would give people a better idea.
Okay.
And then they can look it over, and if they have questions, so be it. But that we could just say, this is what the staff is really focused in on, is on this. But I think that'd be great.
Okay. Picture speaks 1,000 words, so I'll just do that. I'll do something quick soon and give it to Wendy to distribute so people can see it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next one. So we're back to you, Sue, which is
Okay.
Your slide.
So what I just tried to show you is that when we get to the end of the year, here's what the operating budget looks like in terms of what's left. That's before we have a warrant article that says we're going to put 400,000 in the health fund, before we're going to put 200 here or there. So those balances were not necessarily what we brought forward for to offset tax rate. Those are what we had at June 30th.
Okay.
So you can see it varies depending on the year. One thing I didn't do that I thought of is I should go back and look and see what year we had a retirement incentive, because that would have impacted that in some way, maybe, the next year. There might have been some significant things that took place during that year that made those balances a little higher. But I didn't have time to go back and do that research, but I can do that.
Questions? Again, I think since the retirement incentive is going to be a major tool that we're going to use, we should probably plan that we'll have a lower fund balance. I mean, that's going to come out of our fund balance next year, right?
in terms of what we pay the teachers.
Don't we pay them like isn't it like $20,000 we give them?
Right, it can be either or. It can be this year or next year. It can be either year because you're right on the edge. So what I try to do, if I know we have enough, like at the end of this year, we'll have people that have sick time. I'll try to take it out of this year if I know I have enough, so that I don't have to bring it towards the next year. And I have up until the last payrolls run to make that decision. So when I looked at the budget today, just in terms of that fund balance, it's going to probably be more than the 750, most likely.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Sue, so for the finance committee, I mean, I think that it's really important that, you know, when you probably won't have that for the full board on Wednesday, but a week later was
Right.
at the end of the year, I would really like the finance committee to have a better estimate at that point.
Yep.
So they know what they're working with.
What is that date? Because
And we know the official number doesn't come until it's audited, but if you can get
Right,
close to the
right.
number you think it will be, I think it helps
Yeah.
them.
I have a better idea see, what happens is we do those balloon checks. That's the last payroll, the week of the 26th, and our meeting will be just, so we should know that. Yes,
Okay.
that's the big one that's always encumbers everything. And once we release all of that, we know what's left.
So, you know, when you say that, Sue, so our next meeting theoretically, if we go alternating, would be the 24th.
Mhm.
I'm almost wondering, does that mean you'd rather kick it out a week and go July 1st and you'd have the numbers, right?
We could. We could.
Yeah, we can discuss that at the end, but
Yeah, it'll be pretty close on the 24th. Because it's got to be done by Friday and it has to be direct deposited Thursday. It's usually all done and wrapped up on Wednesday,
okay.
for the most part. But yeah,
We can keep our schedule. I think
Yeah.
It'll certainly be closer.
yeah.
All right. Any other questions on the expenditure balances?
I want to point out that salaries and benefits runs 78 to 80% of the total budget.
Yep.
So it makes sense that that's where most of it is. But it looks like, well, on balance, we're generally more consistent there than we are in operations. We have some pretty big swings in the operations side, especially on a percentage basis.
Totally.
Yes. So like it's something that caused a big swing on operations was the year that we had to pay tens of thousands of dollars to have ice and snow removed from the houses. You know, there are things that happen in operations that are completely unpredictable.
Yeah.
Devices that fail, $48,000 air circulators on the middle school as an example. You know, these are the things that you have to adjust. And what Sue and I do is we, you know, have to authorize that to be replaced, and then we try to compensate someplace else in the budget. Normally, we try to keep it in with the division that's going over, but in Jim's case, that snow was massive amount of money, and we couldn't keep it all from him doing his other stuff.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, the next up is the revenue projections, particularly Sue put a slide up if adequacy goes away.
Yeah, so what I did here is, this is my typical, you're looking at that colored form, right, with all the different places. It puts everything in one page. So I used the budget that we currently have for the 22 proposed, just what we currently have without adding anything. So that is the general fund budget plus the warrant article for the bond plus the teachers, because that wasn't in that top number. So that reverts to the 47,326, 181. That's that budget. Then down below, I took the warrant article for the teachers that we had, the amount we had on the warrant article, the 771, 534, and added that in, even though that's probably going to be lower than that. That's what Tim's working on that now. And then I took the number I got for the bond was additional 750 plus the 625, but I'm rechecking that. I actually asked for new schedules today from the bond bank. Did the board vote to go with, I thought we voted for level debt, not level principal, correct?
Yes.
It was level debt, right?
Definitely
Okay.
leveled at.
Okay,
Yeah.
because they wrote up the agreement for a level principal, and I said, that's not right. And I just
Right.
discovered that today. So I reran those numbers. So I've got to check that 750, but if those things were added, there's your total budget. The only thing I did to revenue was I added a conservative number of 150 for Barrington. And that's just assuming right now, I think when I look at that, in that particular year, we have 44 seniors leaving. If we get 50 freshmen, that would only be 6 more. And then so that 150 just kind of represents the increase in the tuition for that year. So that could be bumped up. Then
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Then I just took adequacy, and you can see that I took the 421, 277 out of Lee and the 237, 411 out of Madbury. That's the addition that they'll receive this year, in this fiscal year. Didn't touch any of the assessed valuation. Those generally go up every year. And that's what it looks like. And I think I gave you this in Excel form, so you can do whatever you want to play with all of those to see what it does. So like Michael, you said, what if you change assessment? You can do that with that sheet and see what that does. Add 100, you know.
So Sue, for Michael and Alan, Brian to play with your spreadsheet, it might be helpful for you to look at the assessed value over 5 years for each town.
Yep.
And then they can, average that out and say, okay, the assessed value in the 3 towns over a 5-year period, each town will have grown differently because Durham had a lot of projects at the beginning of that 5-year period that are no longer there. The other thing is, when we give this back to you, I think we should be giving this back to you at the next Finance Committee meeting as well, because if Tim is working on the actual salary numbers, and that's going to go down, that's another piece of the pie.
Yep.
And then when we talk about the retirement incentive, that will push that number down again. So I think we just have to think about this document as a working document that we continuously come back to. I guess that's the point I'm making.
The other thing too is hopefully at some point we'll gain a little bit more knowledge about where the state is at. Because I mean, when I looked at this, it's like Lee and Madbury certainly got a significant, bonus this year, but it's going to be hard with those increases to offset them, the tax increase.
Right.
So you can see over in the revenue piece too, I left a space there that you can put in any of those emergency funds you want to use and see what that does too.
Yeah.
You can just pump those numbers in and it will vary that rate. It'll carry forward and recalculate everything. And
Where is that? That's on the right side, in the green box?
on the right. See that revenue block?
Yep.
See way down below, it says expendable trust fund.
Oh,
You
got
can
it.
put
Right
a
there.
number in there and that will change everything too.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can do that too and bring it to you, but I thought you can also do that.
No, I think it's great. So it gives us the ability to play around with it and work through some scenarios. So I think that's exactly what everybody was looking for.
So you'll have to send us this in the Excel
I
format
didn't
though.
send
'cause
you,
right-
oh, Wendy must have given you the
It's in
PDF.
PDF right now.
Yeah, I can do
so-
that. I can send
yeah.
you that.
Yeah. Yeah. The unfortunate part is we don't have any, or well, unfortunate, not that we would want to, but we don't have any ability to change the impact of the state funding on the towns. That is what it is. And if the state funding changes, it's going to be a lopsided effect on each of the towns to this
Right.
exact dollar amount of what the state does. There's no,
I mean,
Well, except for Durham, because Durham's not
the
getting
good
anything.
news for
right?
us is we already took our hit. Get any bonus money, so it's not going to be any worse. But
be
unfortunately,
careful if you say it can't get any worse. You never
I
know.
like that's true.
Well, the other part of this equation that we don't know, because Todd Selleck shared this with me, and I think Al alluded to it at the last meeting, in terms of COVID funds, the district got $39,000 out of $39 million the state got. but the town got 360. So we don't know what the offset was in Lee and Medbury, because they could have got it through COVID funds and mitigated that potential loss in state funding. I don't know that as a fact, but it seems like if Durham did that well and Lee's half the size, then you would expect that they probably got half the size.
Yeah.
So it was up to 360. It's like we were carefully monitoring. It was any expenses that we incurred because of COVID, the state would offset them, and we submit that. So it's a cap of 360. It doesn't mean we got a bulk check of 360, but I assume that's pretty similar to how it worked for Madbury and Lee.
But not similar at all how it worked in the school systems, because the money was tied to our Title I numbers. And since the district doesn't have a high Title I population, that's why our number is so much more reduced compared to a district that is got high number of kids who are in distress financially, families that are in distress financially. So it proportionally, I'm not arguing that we should have gotten more. I think poor communities should have gotten what they got. It's just that Lee was under the impression, for example, that they thought we were going to get, a lot of money, and it turned out we got very little. And I think that's one of those misunderstandings between how municipal government works and how school government works.
In comparison to Rochester, I think got like $1 million
That's my
in
point.
that money. I mean, and they're not really any bigger than us, so.
But far more.
But their Title I funding is completely opposite of ours, so.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a challenge. I think that this funding coming from the state really has been a challenge for all of us to figure out. That's what we all have in common.
So, aside from the emergency relief that we were just talking about, the state grant, that was in the biennial state budget compromise last year, right? So
Yes.
absent legislative action, it would be in for fiscal year 21. No, let's see. It would be in for fiscal year 20. Yeah. So we had it for fiscal year 20, and it would be in for fiscal year 21 as well, right?
No, it was 2
biennial
years.
budget, and we're in the second year of the biennium.
The second year. The
So
first one was a small bump.
$600,000 is absolutely not part of what Madbury and Lee will get unless there's proactive action in Concord to continue those funds. The governor only signed that biennial budget as a compromise, understanding that compromise would end within the biennium, but it wasn't continued funding.
And given their revenue shortfall, they're probably going to come up with, that's probably in danger.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I think too. That's why I think this spreadsheet that Sue put together is valuable to us, because we're making an assumption, and I think this goes back again to what the three of you asked us to do, to project, worst case scenarios, and losing that funding represents that. So it puts the burden on us to figure out ways of mitigating, recognizing that the tax impact that Sue has in the bottom left is absolutely based on current assessment. And so it's dead wrong from the beginning. It's really a placeholder. And, so there's a lot of different places that Sue and I normally would be, as we got closer to October and our meeting with the 7 of you, would have been adjusting based on the reality of the moment. So here we are in June, and the reality is ill-defined at this point because the state hasn't made any moves in relation to the state budget. But this would represent the very worst case scenario that you asked as a baseline, Al, at the last meeting.
Jim, what's good about this too is that as we do meet with the other towns and talk to the towns, it gives you an opportunity to give Lee and Madbury really the worst case scenario early on and say that this is really beyond our control, but this is our major concern, which is this, the state funding, which really last year helped mitigate the tax impact of these two towns, and that we're concerned that this will go away and this is going to have a big impact, and there's not much we can do about it.
And also they have to understand that, like I said, because it was state aid, it's not like they were offsetting our budget. they were offsetting their tax rates. I think they have to understand that it was not a budgetary, we weren't using those funds to offset our budget. We were using those funds to offset their tax rate. So I think they need to be clear on that, because I think they may assume like, well, you just need to cut your budget to make that number happen again. Like, no, that's not how it happened in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think we need to kind of understand how that process works, because there are people that think that way.
Right.
So.
Let me just clarify my question again to make sure I understand. So the first column of numbers here, the fiscal year 21, that is the second year of the biennial state budget, right? And fiscal year 22 requires a new state budget. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The other thing that, just not to plant a negative seed in your minds, but more of a realistic one, Sue and I got a letter from the state retirement system today, and they've adjusted their projected growth by a full percentage point, which could mean that we could see an increase in our obligation towards the retirement system. Now, when that happened 6 years ago, it was pretty dramatic, and 3 years ago it was less dramatic. So it really boils down to how hard they feel like they can push in an economy like this, in terms of reaching out to the towns and school systems to participate further. They have a legislative mandate to look at their growth over a 5-year period. So we could see an increase there, but that's months away.
What are we paying now? Is it like it's a little over 11%, isn't it?
Between the school system and the teacher employee, it represents 25%, 17+% for
Okay.
teachers, and then the difference is coming out of the teachers themselves. So it's a pretty big chunk of change.
And that shows up in the salaries portion of the budget?
Benefits.
Or benefits. Yeah, it's in the benefits.
Yes.
Okay.
But that 7% that they pay comes out of their
Right.
Right.
out of their side, not our side.
Not our
So-
side, but it's 17 from us
Right.
for the teacher
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah, it's big.
Big number.
All right, other questions on the spreadsheet? Thank you, Sue. This is really going to be helpful.
I have two unrelated questions for Sue at some point that are not directly tied to this.
Why don't you do them now before you forget them?
Okay, so one of them is, and I'm not advocating necessarily for either one of these things. I just want to understand. One of them is we haven't. The warrant article for the bond did not define a time frame. Are we locked into the 25-year issue at this point, or is that still an open item with regards to how long that issue is? Like if we my back of the envelope math says if you went from a 25-year to a 30-year, obviously you're going to pay a lot more interest in the long run, but your payment on each year may drop by $250,000 or $300,000.
So I think that's a question we should go back to our bond attorney on, Michael, rather than shoot from the hip, right, Sue?
Yeah, I mean, we can. Remember that when you go out more too, your interest rate's probably going to be higher,
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Okay, right.
right?
Your rate does go up.
Yep.
And the jump from 25 to 30 is greater than the jump from 20 to 25,
Okay.
generally.
Okay.
So,
But it's a question worth asking. I mean, that short-term gain, long-term loss, I get that, but at least it's worth asking the question. $250,000 when we're looking at what we're looking at in 21, 22 is at least worth investigating.
Well, unfortunately, it wouldn't be that much until 3 or 4 years down the road when the full payments kick in also. So it's not going to help us with the couple of years we're looking at right here anyway.
But when we hit year 3, we start paying. It would impact a little bit in year 3, a little bit more in year 4, and then completely in 5.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to make a decision like that, it has to be done very soon because that paperwork's been done and it has to be signed.
Well, that's this paperwork
week,
Tom
too.
is asking
Yes.
for.
It's gonna
Yeah,
be, yeah.
Tom's got that on the agenda for Wednesday. He saw the number and kind of swallowed hard, and he just wants to make sure the board is in agreement, even though you already are in agreement. He wants to kind of have 6 people behind him when he signs that particular sheet of paper.
It's an 8-page document, and he just thought it would be wise to bring it to you to review and just make a motion to authorize him to sign on your behalf.
I
Only
like the plausible deniability fact that Tom's in his own language. I can totally blame him.
We can call
All
the
right.
bond attorney tomorrow. We can call the bond bank tomorrow and give you that
Yep.
kind of information relatively quickly. We'll just send it out to you in an email, and you guys
Yep.
can.
It's probably a non-issue. I think the factors that Brian outlined and the fact that it doesn't provide any benefit in this short-term window.
Well, do you want us to do it or not?
Well,
I think
and
we should. I think we should for due diligence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
You know?
it's still an option for the second round too, next
That's
year.
true.
Oh,
Next year.
okay.
And on a side note to that, Michael, the Fed chairman was speaking today, and he had mentioned that the rates are going to stay at the Fed rate is going to stay at near zero till at least 2022. So that'll include the first. So the second bond is probably be around the same rate as the first bond.
Okay.
So I mean, that was the biggest fear for a lot of people was, oh, what if it goes up, through the roof
Right.
by the second bond? Looks like now it's going to hold pretty steady for both issues, which will be nice.
That is good news.
Michael, did you have a second random thought?
Yeah, the second question is related to the reserve funds, and specifically the special education reserve fund. So, with what we've discussed in the past is that those funds can be used as a source of revenue, but they cannot be used independent of the budget overall to authorize new expenditures. So when it comes to that special ed fund, we've said that that's really to guard against the impact of an unexpected expense in special ed, but it really wouldn't help us immediately, right? It would be a subsequent fiscal year. I'm trying to understand how that benefits us if it doesn't let us expend directly from that fund. And
It would work the same way as our emergency funds, that the board can authorize the expenditure. You can create, as Sue said on the spreadsheet she gave you, that how much of the emergency trust fund you want to spend. There's nothing magic, and Catherine can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we have $500,000 there. If a student moved in, a family moved in, and they had an out-of-district placement, and it was one of the worst-case scenarios, you're looking at, $180,000. So that seems like a lot of money to have in reserve. But is 500 too much? Is 400 more appropriate? I think that's a conversation we certainly can have, and we can use that as identified revenue if we want to use it to offset the cost.
But you can't use it, Jim. My question would be so suppose starting July 1st, or call even August 1st, somebody moves into the district and they have $180,000 placement. We've already approved the budget. You can't. Can you take the $180,000 out of the special ed fund and use it? Wouldn't that push the budget?
What it's there for?
You would do it at the end of the year when you figure out how much you need. You would, at the board, vote it out of there.
You look at end of the year balances in the special ed account and the sheet that Sue gave you. You see it's all over the map. There was a year that we actually had 3 kids move in. And then Catherine works with Sue and me and tries to figure out if she can absorb that inside her budget. You might recall around March of this year, we actually raised the yellow flag to the full board and said, things are a little nerve-wracking right now in special education. We might have to come back to you at the end of the year and say, we need some money to offset cost in special education. It doesn't look like we're going to have to do that because Sue's now projected an end of the year balance. So that's what that does for you. If we can't compensate, which is our first try at this is always, can we absorb that inside the approved budget? And if we absolutely do not believe we can, then we turn to the board and say, we can't, this trust fund exists. Will you release the funds so that we can compensate for this extraordinary cost.
And we could do that within the same fiscal year without having to have a new budget approved. So let's
Right.
say in Al's example that we become aware of that event, in August, we could release those funds for use in the fiscal year 21 without it impacting the rest of the budget. We would be an additional expenditure on top of the rest of the budget. Is that correct?
Have the authority to release those funds.
Okay.
Now, Jim, you mentioned that 180,000. I've seen placements for residentials that can be up to 350,000. So that's why it's 500,000, because if you recognize it in 1 year after the budget season, you've got to have that half year plus another whole year. So that's why we let it get to 500.
Okay.
Good. Thank you, Sue, for that clarification.
Okay. Thank you. I wasn't quite understanding how that helped us in the short term, and that makes more sense now. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that would be the same, Sue, with like the emergency funds as well. Say like a boiler or an air handler went in the middle of the school year. It's a $250,000 air handler, and you say we can't absorb that in the budget. We have to use the emergency fund, and so the emergency fund, then you could take that out of the emergency fund, right? Or do you have
Only, but in that case, you'd have to get permission from the commissioner to utilize it for that. If you
Well,
use it,
but that's not true for all of those accounts. That's only
no, just that one, just the
Right.
emergency one.
Okay.
Most of those accounts, the one that requires the commissioner's approval, Al, was the very first one we set up together.
Yeah.
And we learned that the best way to do it was to avoid that particular account and establish trust accounts that the voters approve and give U7 the authorization to release. But we can use the emergency fund if in building a budget if we're using it to offset taxes. And clearly that's our goal, is to offset taxes. So on the front end, we can do it.
So if the use of that fund, the emergency fund, is built into the budget, then it doesn't require the commissioner's approval.
As long as your statement is you're using it for tax relief, because the two conditions is you can ask the commissioner if it's not tax relief, but if it is tax relief, then you have the authorization to use it.
Perfect. Okay.
That's good. All right. Other questions on the spreadsheet or any other questions? And if not, we'll move on to we'll tackle the retirement stuff that was put together.
So I give you a real list. This isn't a made up list. This is a list that I asked the Guild to do for me, mid-year, because I thought that this would be something that the board would want to have a conversation about. And ultimately, the board decided not this year, but possibly next. Well, we're here at the next year. You can see, you go down through the positions themselves, a kindergarten. So you have a teacher, for example, let's use the kindergarten teacher position. That particular person's making $78,000. Kindergarten position, if we opened that up and we needed to fill it, we'd probably get 60, 70 applicants, if not more. And so you could predict that the cost of the replacement for a kindergarten teacher would be less than the cost of our current kindergarten teacher. And that's not a reflection on quality. We're just talking numbers because we have some outstanding people in these positions. But going down through it, let's take a different position, that a school counselor, for example, if a school counselor retires, it's unlikely that we'd end up with a school counselor at the beginning of their career, because you want to make sure you have the expertise in that position, and you're probably only going to get a dozen applicants. And so the pool gets smaller, the cost goes up. The pool gets larger, the cost goes down. And then ultimately in the retirement incentive, what you're really hoping is that the student population shifts enough so that we'll use the kindergarten position again. It won't necessarily be a kindergarten position, but we'll say it's a primary elementary position. You're kind of hoping that you don't have to replace the position at all. An example of that would be the current fourth grade is much larger than the kindergarten. And so, theoretically, you could run the elementary school with one less elementary teacher. And so what happens to that kindergarten position, there's an internal reshuffle with a smaller staff. and you do some reassignments. What does that mean? It means that you save an entire salary and benefits. In that case, you're probably looking at $100,000 plus in total savings. So as we look at the retirement incentive and you look at these salaries, it's the combination of, hiring a less expensive staff member or not replacing somebody at all. And, that particular savings then is built into your budget for years to come. So it's not a one-time savings.
So my question for you, Jim, is just a time frame logistical thing. So we've seen who is eligible, and I think looking at enrollment, it seems an area that we're really that we potentially are focusing in on is an elementary position, theoretically, that we wouldn't replace. Mm-hmm. How would we know? The question is, we build the budget, we offer the retirement incentive. How would you know that you didn't need the teacher, or when would you know you didn't need the teacher, that we had the enrollment so you didn't replace them?
So that's the crystal ball question. What I do is the same thing that, for example, Michael did when he was estimating the cost of utilities. I look at the 5-year average over an incoming class. In our kindergarten classes about 3 years ago took pretty significant decrease, and we wondered at the time whether it was a 1-year factor. Now we're entering the 3rd year. The numbers have been pretty constant. Doesn't mean that in a given year, even using that you wouldn't have a major increase in enrollment. But it does mean at the point that you're trying to make a determination on the budget that your best estimate is based on past results, sort of like the stock market. You're trying to predict what your needs are based on history. It's not, and we also have the long-range planning numbers, which have validated those numbers now for several years, and so it's better than back of the napkin, but it's not rocket science. It's best guess based on numbers that you have and numbers that have been projected.
So what you do know, or what you can kind of predict, is that the new salary will be lower than the salary it's replacing. You just don't know if you're going to get the whole position.
That's right. So, on Wednesday, you'll get a whole host of salaries because we have a bunch of nominations. All but one of those is a very reasonable cost replacement. And the one that isn't out of the stratosphere. It just happens that the person had the skill set that we needed and was the best person for the position. So when you get those nominations, we always give you, the salary of the person leaving and then the salary of the person coming in. And we've added a new column for you guys to consider, and that is the budgeted amount, because Sue and Tim made adjustments in terms of the personnel costs to make sure that the budget was balanced as we entered the new fiscal year.
So I have one more question. This is a process thing. So it appears the retirement incentive is going to be a tool that we're likely going to use. So what would you envision the time frame of doing it? I know that, don't the teachers have until December to put their names in? Was that contractually? Or?
When I build the plan, I put a deadline in. I sit with the guild, and the plan is the same plan I use every single time. But what I change is the deliverable. What's the finite date that they have to submit? And then if the board approves the list, it's irrevocable. If the board approves this next week, and then we set a deliverable, say, of the opening of school in September, that gives us plenty of time to calculate those savings into the budget, the proposed budget. But we could set an earlier date. The only reason I use that is teachers are dispersed. But if we're telling them this early, then we could set a date that's earlier. I mean, as I said, a lot of these people on this list, were already doing their homework in relation to the retirement and how it would benefit them. And, you know, the criteria to retire is you have to be age eligible and service eligible. And so on this list, you'll see somebody who isn't. The third position down, you have somebody who's 58. Well, the retirement system says you have to be 60, and at least 5 or 10 years, depending on when you were hired on service. So there are a couple of people here who, and this was done last year, will be right on the cusp, and there's one who is well below 60, but they chose to retire this year, so they're not even worried about a retirement incentive. So the list I think the list will change a little bit. We'll find people who weren't service eligible when this list was generated who are now. And, you know, we've been having conversations, or I've been having conversations with the Guild right along. So if the board approves this won't come as a surprise to the Guild. So I'll leave it there. So that's really where we are. It may be worth our time as a board to investigate support staff retirements as well. When we did this, we did a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage, and some of our support staff are definitely age eligible to retire, and it may be to our advantage to think about that. Not necessarily on the same night, but we could do that work over the course of the summer and see whether that's whether there's savings there, potential savings there as well.
Jim, just in a question in regards to this worksheet, I see you have a point system, obviously, which is the age plus the years of service. But so if we say we offer 3 retirement savings, does that mean the top 3 point getters that are eligible can take advantage of it? Is that what the whole idea behind this is?
Yeah, this was built at the point when we were actually using the contract language. My recommendation to the committee and to the full board would be not to limit the number of retirements, because it's to our advantage this time not to. But when we were doing this, we wanted to make sure that we were clear who had the most years of service and was age eligible. And so what you're saying, Brian, is exactly right, except say the first person on the list says, I don't want to retire, then you go to the 4th person. And when we looked at this, we actually thought that a couple of the people in the top tier last year wouldn't have retired, whereas it may make a big difference in terms of the retirement incentive. So one of our teachers is very, very skilled at, one of our Guild leaders is very skilled at helping teachers understand the benefit of the retirement incentive and how it advantages them throughout their retirement. So they usually turn to him for guidance, and he's very, very good with them.
And if somebody is not age eligible, like the 3rd person on the list, are they not eligible for the retirement incentive, or are they? How does that figure in? Are they okay?
That's the reason I did that is because with the very first time we offered an incentive, we had somebody who had their service years in, but was not age eligible for full retirement. So a teacher can retire earlier than age 60, but they take a penalty for each year they're below 60.
Yeah.
That wasn't the intent that the board had at the time, nor I, so I changed it so it would be age eligible for retirement as well as years of service, and that cleaned up that loophole.
Okay. So does that mean that teachers who are not age eligible are not eligible for the retirement incentive?
The way I've worked it, that is true, Michael.
Okay. All right. I hear that you're recommending that there be open-ended number of incentives offered, but if the board decided to limit that number, does it have the discretion to add to that later on?
Oh, sure. You always have that discretion, but if we looked at, for example, if we could say we could reduce our elementary teachers by 2, it would take you all the way down the list to like number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You'd have to go to the 7th person before you could grab onto that open position.
Right.
So, and then if you were looking to reduce it even further, say, you know, enrollment goes down even further, you're almost to the end of the list before there's a 3rd primary position. So
Right.
My recommendation would just be to do it open-ended and see what we get. And I think that will work to the board's as well as the staff's advantage, which is the definition of the incentive. It's got to work for both sides.
Right. And the incentive, I know we've answered this question before, but I can't remember. The incentive, we have the discretion of paying it, would have the discretion of paying it in either fiscal year 21 or 22?
Yeah, the language allows Sue some discretion. I think it says within one paycheck of the last paycheck of the end of the year, or some language like that, which gives Sue the chance to say, okay, we should do this now, or let's wait till the first payroll and do it. And
okay.
Yeah, she's pretty good at watching that like a hawk, because she doesn't like to have all of that come in one year.
Yeah. Something I would be interested in, and I would imagine other members as well, and this is not specifically a financial aspect, but I think we have an interest as a school community in having a balance of years of service across the faculty, the group of faculty as a whole. So I wonder if it would be easy to provide, you know, how many of our teachers are 0 to 5 years, or you know, how many are 5 to 10, something like that.
Yeah, I keep that. I need it for negotiations, and so that's readily available. Wendy would have to just do a quick update, but we keep that as a standard document in the office when we're talking about changes in lanes and experience, and we have to keep it for the guild in case there is ever a reduction in force, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So that's a standard document we have.
I don't expect that this would create a situation where we had a significant imbalance, but it would be good to make sure that.
So the amazing thing about our schedule, which I have in front of me, is that you know, a teacher can get to the top of the schedule in really 15 years, and then we have the longevity of 4 more. So, you know, about halfway through their career, they max out the schedule. So we have a lot of people who have a lot of experience under their belt, but aren't age eligible yet. If you start at, say, 23 years old as a teacher, you could have 25 years in and not even be 50 yet. So we have a lot of veteran teachers who, and a lot of middle-level teachers. When I first came into the district 8 years ago, it was extremely lopsided towards the top. And over the time that we've all worked together, we've actually created a much better distribution of experience and to new teachers. The new teachers still is light. I would say that the district is heavy in the middle and heavy at the top, just because it doesn't take that long in your career to get to the top.
But you've also changed the hiring practice, really, in essence, that you are bringing in more younger teachers, as opposed to in the past, when somebody retired, they were bringing in somebody who was still near the top of the pay scale. So that has helped the distribution for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's and the principals have been very dedicated to wanting to mix it up themselves. I mean, we just go back to the last board meeting. We were very, very fortunate to get a psychologist who only had 1 school year behind her. That never happens. And she did her internship in our district, so we were super excited about getting her back. But that would have been a position I would have predicted that would have been expensive for us to get, and it turned out that it was not, and just gratuitous that she had done her internship and knew us.
And the years of service here are years of service at Oyster River, right? It doesn't reflect prior teaching experience.
That's correct.
So here's another, back to the process, and this is above my pay grade. When would you envision bringing the retirement incentive question to the board? The first meeting of July?
Well, I mean, part of it is it can be the first meeting of July, but quite honestly, you know, I know the board likes to have 2 bites of the apple, but we've bitten this apple about 6 times in the last, 14 months. So maybe the board would be in a position that it wants to move on the next meeting, but if not, the first meeting in July is not going to be a deal breaker, whether it's next week or 2 weeks from now.
Well, I mean, I'd leave that to you guys to say. I think it would not be a bad idea to put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Is that next Wednesday?
It's
and
there.
At least it's there. Good. Yeah, I think this is one of those that we know we're going to want to get done. I'd rather give as much flexibility as possible, if that's possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think you combine this with, the adjustment that Tim's going to make, and we can reduce, significantly that $700,000 increase in personnel costs for the teachers.
So the next, it wasn't on our agenda one. There's another item that Sue included, which was the district leases for transportation.
Yeah, that was information that Michael asked for. He was trying to get a handle on our leases. So it wasn't an official item. We certainly can talk about it, or we can put it on the agenda for the next finance committee, whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to dig into it tonight. I was trying to get a sense of the the non-negotiable portion of the budget. We know that we've got this 80% that's salaries and benefits. That is what it is. And then we've got and then the next big chunk is contractual obligations that we've already committed to. So
and we can add that as an agenda item next time, Alan.
Again, we're an hour and 20 minutes into this, so let's throw that on, and we can talk about where, besides like where we are in the whole process of bus replacement and that. So I think that would that would be a good idea. All right, so that brings us. I have to find my agenda back up. So that's, I think, brought us up to district questions, and we didn't really have any new district questions. The
only other thing I did think, did Wendy send you a copy of the draft budget schedule today?
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
I know there was some talk about changing the time frame, but I just want to caution you in terms of why we have that, push that meeting out to November, is because that's when we get our guaranteed maximum. So if we present to you with a budget without that, then we have to go back and revise if it changes. So we kind of like to have that number before we present.
That was board request, guys, that, we were presenting that workshop in October and then coming back 3 weeks later and making an adjustment. And you guys said, why don't we just do it in November when we have the number?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is different about this year, Jim, is they're going to be getting regular updates from this finance committee. So it's not like it's going to be any surprises. There's every 2 weeks, there's a report that's coming in giving them more information. My only request with that is that we get the budget books before we go into the budget meeting.
Sure. I mean, because of the work that you guys are doing, it will be easier for us to get the budget books together. I mean, the principals already are on notice in terms of, I've already told them I want flat funding on supplies and materials. And so it will be relatively easy. I don't see any requests that I could support at this point in relation to new personnel. So we're going into this with a much more draconian mindset than we've ever gone into a budget. And again, I don't mean that in a subjective way of just telling people, as recently as today in our staff meeting with the administrators, every dollar we save means potentially saving, a staff member's job. And I sent them the article. I don't know if you guys saw it, from the Boston Globe about Massachusetts, and Massachusetts superintendents have put out thousands upon thousands of pink slips before they even start the year, because the state is projecting that they'll reduce funding for education by 20%. And, that somewhat is predictable in the environment. But then concurrently, the commissioner in Massachusetts put out the guidelines for opening school in the fall. And the guidelines included cutting their class sizes to 10, and each school system having to buy their own PPE equipment. And so, the uproar, as you can imagine, across Massachusetts is those two things are incompatible. And so, My closing comment to the administrators was, let's just hope New Hampshire does a better job of putting out a plan at the beginning of July that is helpful and not useless like that.
Yeah,
Well, luckily our numbers are much better than theirs. So you got that going for us.
Well, I mean, I always hated that we have to do the contractual thing to pink slip people just because it's a contractual thing, even though it's nonsensical with the social distancing thing. You clearly can't do it. And it really puts teachers in a bad position. And for many districts, that's how you lose a lot of teachers because they take another job. So it's a terrible way to do business.
Brockton, Mass is probably as similar to us as you can get. And they put out blanket pink slips. And, within a week, they're retracting all of them because of the uproar that happened in the community. It's just not a good way to do business. See, believe it or not, and then you guys, not working with teachers as employees may find this hard to believe, but you look at that retirement list with somebody who has 27 or 30 years experience, they're nervous about losing their jobs. And teachers are by nature incredibly anxious people when it comes to their jobs. And no matter where they are on the experience scale, they're anxious. I got a call from the guild president last week, and she said, is the board considering reductions in force? And I said, not at this time. And we're looking to see if we can build a frugal budget. Going back to that whole conversation, Catherine's got several outstanding paraeducator positions that she hasn't filled. Jim has not filled a summertime position. Every time a position opens, I'm having conversations with people. Can you live without? Can you live without? Can you live without? And, it's a different time for Oyster River than it has been in the past. And it's hard because you're trying to change the mentality of an entire organization.
All right, so that gets us back down to the next thing is prioritizing actions based upon board questions and committee decisions. I think we already threw one out there, which is the transportation. We'll go over on the next one. Do we want to take a bite at looking at the CIP, potential CIP for next year?
I think that's a good idea. I'm not optimistic yet. So I'm looking at the CIP the way I'm looking at the retirement incentive. We may have to, going back to our conversations, Al, when you were sitting right next to me during budget deliberations, this particular year we're going into isn't necessarily the last year that we're going to strip out capital projects. And, I've had this conversation with Sue and Jim, so this isn't, in-house baseball. So I think seeing that list is important. I think that set of projects is going to have to be on the table as we try to look through this next budget, and how much will the board has. When we had that conversation, it was a difficult conversation during budget deliberations. It'll be a difficult conversation again, but I'm equating every savings with the savings of a teacher or a para that we need to service our kids, and so if we can. What I say to Sue today is we can hold this budget, it helps us in the next budget. And so, that's how I'm seeing things right now, Al.
So in my mind, it's like, this is almost gives me PTSD of like the old budget committee that we had way back when. But it's really like, I like if Jim can bring forward back that 5-year plan, and this is almost like, maybe reprioritizing, or what do we have to have? So I think it'd be a good discussion for the next meeting.
I do too, and it might be a whole host of small projects like the doors that were on his list tonight, and the smaller projects that get us through the have-tos, and the bigger projects for 22, 23, or 23, 24.
Anything else? What else do people want on the list?
Can I go back to the calendar, the budget calendar for just a second?
Sure.
There is a discrepancy between this and the school board calendar in terms of the date of the public hearing. This says January 12th, and the calendar of meetings says January 13th.
Oh, okay.
We'll fix that.
Yeah, and then for us, for this group, the first thing on here is really what's most important, I think, for us. September 16th, school board goals, fiscal year 22 budget. So we have to kind of zero in on how we get to that point with either a structure at least, or a recommendation to the rest of the school board, probably a meeting before that, ideally.
Well, Michael, I was thinking along the lines that Al was talking about the last meeting, where he said, give us an austere budget, give us a little bit less than austere budget, and give us a tight budget or something. And that, and then that spreadsheet that Sue gave us tonight, if we continue to work that for July and August, we'll be in a much better position to say this is the recommendation and this is how we'd achieve it. That's what I'm thinking. I think that will get us to where we want to be, and we'd end up with a budget that, I think the community will support. Because everybody, what I said to Al earlier when we were talking, I don't know if I did it at this committee or just when we were talking one-on-one, but the work that we do has to also be supported by the larger community. So we don't want to go into a deliberative session and somebody adjust our budget up after months and months and months of strategically putting a budget together that we think the communities can afford. So it is a delicate balance, as Al said earlier, between trying to bring in a tight budget and also making sure that nobody turns it on its head when they can.
That's what's so much nicer about the town budget, Jim. We just raise our hands and it's done.
Yeah.
We don't never done. But I think, like, in terms of time frame with Michael's question, it's like, I think as we work our way through some of the retirement incentive, the CIP, and that we're going to get to what we think is a realistic number. What happened on the town side was we reached a point where the number, Todd didn't think it was, he thought the cuts were too draconian, that the budget didn't achieve what we were trying to achieve. And so then he put the alternatives on the table and said, this is what we're looking at. And so I really like that structure, just because the board was informed, but it had to make the tough decisions. And I think that maybe that's an idea just to throw out there for the school board as well.
Yeah, I think, any process that we put on play that, the board is comfortable with, Sue and I will make happen. It's just, we don't have any choice in this environment. We have to figure it out.
Anything else?
Should we discuss for Wednesday, or I don't know, Jim, you already have this planned for next Wednesday. Is there an update as to where we are for hirings for next year, and where, if there's any budget savings and the replacements that you've made for people that have left?
So that won't, yes, there are savings as we're going through, but we won't realize what those savings are until much later in the summer, because each one of those employees has to meet with Teresa, and they have to go through their employee package and choose the health insurance.
Gotcha.
So, if we did it based on salaries, we would be deceiving you, because we need to know what the health insurance, the big one is the health insurance.
Gotcha.
So, if we hire somebody young, and, we cannot ask whether they're married, we can't ask whether they have children. So you can make an assumption that a 23-year-old is coming in and just going to insure themselves, and they may have a new baby and been married the year before,
Gotcha.
So that spreadsheet is being maintained every time that you guys do an approval. And so it's usually around August. So I wanted to get back to Michael's question, because I think it's a good question. When should we attempt to do a budget goal? I think we should attempt to do it by the end of the summer and start floating it with the board in September. I mean, I know August is a big month for us because there's about the opening of school and so forth, but this is equally big, and I think we need to start, spreading that seed among the full board and see where people, going back to what you were saying, Al, where their comfort level is. So I would like to be able to come out of the summer with all the work that this committee has done and come in with a budget recommendation, a budget goal.
I agree.
When do we know for sure when we'll have the payment schedule for the bond issue from the bond bank?
Yes, we should know it in August. They're putting it out in July.
So we'll have it right away after the issue happens. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm right, Sue? We'll have it.
Yes, I'll just verify that, but yeah, I'm quite sure.
And if we can get this information out, if the board supports a retirement incentive, we could say, we would like to know the deadline by the end of August, and that would give us that one more. That would give us another number. And also just it's a product of not just expenditures but revenue. So we'll have those emergency funds and so forth to work from as well. So I think today Sue and I were talking about it in depth, and we both left the room feeling like we could get the job done once we know what the goal ultimately is.
Yeah, I'm less pessimistic right now for some reason. I really am. I think that we're not in as bad a shape as I thought we were.
Well, that makes one of us.
I'm not. I mean, I don't think it's going to be easy, and it is daunting. I think the uncertainties make me more nervous than anything else, particularly like how do we even open the school up or how that's going to work. But I think that we have enough tools that hopefully we aren't suffering some of the horrible things said about Massachusetts.
Every administrative meeting we have now, the principals are asking if I'm all right. I'm fine. I just know the numbers keep on haunting me, and it's hard to smile when I haven't crested the mountain yet. Once where we are, I think I'll be able to relax. But the opening of school and the 21-22 budget will haunt me until we actually do them.
Well, there's a lot of factors out there that are not under our control, and the way we open up school is one of them.
Yeah.
And what costs will be incurred there. So,
well, that's
I wouldn't get too confident, Al.
I'm not. Normally, I'm pretty pessimistic. I mean, I grew up a Cubs fan, but I think that
that can make you an eternal optimist.
So. I think that, I'm hopeful that as we work through this, we'll come through a good decision. So that's the best you can hope for.
I think we will. I think we'll get there.
So that brings us then to the next thing, which is the determining the agenda for the next meeting. I think we have at least a couple of things.
So I wrote down several things out. Can I run it by you and see if this is what the board wants? So we had the bus replacement schedule and leases. We wanted to bring back the revenue expense sheet and adjust it as Sue has new information each meeting. We wanted to see the CIP plan, the 5-year plan, and specifically focus in on the 21-22. And then that was what I had. Those 3 things were new.
I think that's a pretty good start. I think it'll probably take Jim a while to go through the CIP stuff.
Okay, we'll make him the center of center square.
There we go. So that would be then the next. Does that put us then the next meeting would be June 24th at 6 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yep.
Michael, I forgot to ask today, and I'll ask you and I'll ask Tom. The July board meeting, I would like to be able to take off so that Todd could fill in for me, just because I'd like to get down and celebrate the 4th with my oldest son in Maryland. You have any problem with that?
I don't see a problem with that.
Okay, I'll ask Todd tomorrow.
Hi.
What's that? Oh, I'm going to die. You can pay me to get on a plane right now. Yeah, I wouldn't even go, if somebody gave me first class, I wouldn't get on a plane. This is a lot of issues, just because of my age. Even though I feel perfectly healthy, I'm in that in that age group where this is pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
All right, I think
run that by Tom tomorrow, Michael. Thank you.
The other variable for us is I believe that Tom's sending the letter to the select boards and council, inviting them to meet with us sometime today or tomorrow. So hopefully we'll hear from them before our next meeting and have a sense of when we will be able to meet with them.
And I thought he crafted that pretty well in terms of not just a one-off, but touching base with us every 6 weeks or so they could see where we are in our progress and ask questions. I thought that was a pretty smooth move on Tom's part.
Yeah, and the thing is, she really wanted it too. I would like to stress it's a two-way street that you guys will have a chance to ask us about what's going on with our budget process, where we are with all the things, because in some ways it feels like the town is like dictating what the schools are doing or the way it's coming across, and I don't want it to be like that. I really think there's very few times that all of the towns and the cooperative ever sit down together with the schools. And the silver lining of COVID is like, where are there places we can work together?
Yeah. Yeah. And the reminder that, the taxpayer that we're all asking taxes from is the same taxpayer. It's not divided. I mean, on paper, it's divided municipal, county, and school, but that's one individual paying that tax bill. It's not, three different tax bills. And so that you're right, Al. I think it's very important during this time that everybody knows what everybody is doing.
And then Tom's way he did it too. The way I said I liked it because I don't really know what Lee and Madbury's budget cycle is like, but by the beginning of September, we're going to be really deep at the town level in the budget, and especially as we move into October, we'll be really kind of cranking along. So it'll be interesting to hear how Lee and Madbury are doing and what's going on with them.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know if they've even started the budget process, to be honest with you. I think we are so far early in the process. I mean, we're really starting at 6 months out. That's never happened before. And
It's like
that's a strong indication of how serious the board is taking this.
Does Lee use a July or a January fiscal year?
I want to say that both the small towns run their budget cycle the same way we do.
Lee's definitely July, because I know they're trying to shore up their numbers for the end of the year, so they're doing a lot of budget stuff now, expenditures that they had to do. So I know it's July 1st.
Madbury is odd. Madbury is a calendar year, fiscal year, but the budget's not approved until March of the year you're in.
Yeah. 3
Really?
months the budget's implemented.
So the budget's already in effect before they approve it,
Or
is it the next year?
You're starting to spend money from your new budget before you have approved it.
wow.
Is that even legal?
Last day they're doing it.
Must be, yeah.
Yeah, each of the towns have such different characteristics, just completely different.
The effect of that is Madbury has its budget hearing about the same time as we have ours, and then it's approved the same day that ours is approved. It's just that it's 2 months in arrears. Yeah.
All right. Anything else? I think that
Thank you,
covered
guys.
everything.
Appreciate it.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
All right.